The Way of the Pilgrim?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
I think it was written by an Orthodox monk on Mount Athos, which is like, do y'all know about Mount Athos?
Mm-mm.
It's like where all the there used to be like 40,000 monks on this one island. It's an island, and I think there's only like 4,000 now, but um, they just lived their lives set apart together.
So there's a lot of those from Ireland. This is off of Greece though.
Yeah,
Okay, and this would be after the Desert Fathers.
yeah,
Because I think the Desert Fathers were part of the Orthodox Church.
yeah. Well,
Right,
I
right.
mean, prior to this East-West schism,
Mhm.
everybody was kind of the same.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think I think the book was like written maybe around the 1800s or maybe earlier. I'm not really sure, but it's kind of like you heard the prayer, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me.
Mhm.
Well, it kind of definitely popularized that in a way, but it's also kind of an allegory in a sense. It's I don't think it's meant to be read literally, but it's a deep book on like contemplative prayer and interior prayer.
Who
It's
wrote it?
um I don't know if they know exactly the
Okay.
author. It was kind of like an oral story, and then a monk wrote it on Mount Athos, I believe. Who the author is, I think they might know, but they might not know. I don't think I know.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look it up, The Way of the Pilgrim,
Cool.
it's actually very well known in certain circles. But it's a book about prayer, and this guy is like, how do I pray without ceasing? Because
Mm-hmm.
Paul commands us to pray without ceasing. And there's another book called the Philokalia. I think it's also Orthodox, but it's like a lot of the church fathers and desert fathers, uh, and a lot of their wisdom in that, but also people after them, so pre 1000 and post. But this verse was like pretty. This kind of, well, it's like the idea is all of our works come out of prayer.
Mm.
That's what the book
Nothing.
is trying to say.
Yeah, and I mean it goes along with every other Christian mystic, if you want to.
Mhm.
It's like all true work of God is birthed from
Mhm.
prayer.
Yeah.
So that would be like the river and the well of water springing up to eternal life. Like prayer kind
Yeah,
of primes the pump, and then as it flows, then that's how those are the good works, the fruits, right?
yeah.
Okay.
First Timothy. He says, First Timothy chapter 2, verse 1. It says, first of all, then I urge you to pray. First of all, pray. And then everything else follows after that. And I mean, I think that concept, that everything that is a work of God is birthed out of contemplative prayer or praying without ceasing. But it's a good book because, I mean, it's kind of funny. It's kind of an interesting book because he goes to this guy, he's like, how do I pray without ceasing? And the guy's like, well, why don't you start off by saying, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me 3,000 times.
Okay.
And so he does it. He says it 3,000 times. He counts, no, and see, it's an allegory. Nobody's going to sit there and count, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me 3,000 times. Or maybe they would, but that would be, it's not, I don't think it's meant to be taken like that. But as often, and so then he's like, all right, I've said it 3,000 times. He's like, now say it 6,000 times. And he's like, all right, and each time the number goes up, it requires like a bit of perseverance, a bit of like, it's kind of hard in the beginning, and then momentum builds, and then he's like, now say it 12,000 times or something, and eventually he's like, it became more natural to say it. And then when I didn't say it, I felt like I was missing something. And, but I think ultimately it's not, if I say this, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me 1,000, 3,000, 5,000 times, but it's like kind of this allegory of persevering in being conscious of God as often and as regularly as possible. And if saying Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, and you're directing your attention to the reality of Jesus Christ, that he is the Son of God, that he is man, that he is God, and he has mercy on us. All of those components, just like, and then you just gently set aside every other thought. And so, I don't know, and then it goes on and it describes a deep, more in depth of his journey, but that's kind of the beginning, the very, very beginning of the story. But without going too much into it further, but then once that really ultimately develops into like a quiet interior prayer of the soul, where it's just a quiet, conscious awareness of God. Like Brother Lawrence said, he's like, it was harder for me to not be aware of God than it was to be aware of God.
I see what he's talking about as it was meant to be a means to an end, and if I sat there and I said, God have mercy, Jesus have mercy on me, Son of God have mercy on me, and said it just over and over and over, well, that would be better than what my mind wanders to, 70% of the time or whatever. So that would actually be better. It should produce some fruits there but at some point, I think God's like, look, my relationship with you is not meant to be, you just say this line over and over.
Yeah, and exactly. That's why it's kind of an allegory, but it's speaking to what I think it is speaking to, persevering in a posture and heart of conscious awareness of God. And, that is that recollection, like, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me. And then I'm back aware of God again. But he's saying, like, if you say that enough, then it'll become internalized and your heart will say it. And every beat of your heart is, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me. And, again, don't take it literally. Don't say this prayer 5,000 times a day. But it is embodying that. And
the repetition and the practice and the memory, and
turning your heart, turning your mind to God as often as you remember to, and
it's getting it ingrained so that you can pray without ceasing, so to speak.
So it's like, how do you? Paul commands that, and I think that's at the beginning of like, so if all of divine action comes out of prayer, then I think the first thing that's required of us is to learn how to pray and pray without ceasing. And then everything else is going to come.
Absolutely.
So like our greatest work, and that's what the author of The Cloud says too, is like, and Teresa of Avila or whatever, they all say like, 15 minutes spent in contemplative prayer is better than 1,000 hours of intellectual study. Or doing a work from that place of deep prayer is far better than any other work done out of religion or, it's.
Yeah. Well, you look at Psalm 91, that's just a a perfect example of prayer to the extent where natural disasters are subdued, don't have
Yeah.
any authority. What's
Yeah.
the kingdom within you has now exerted dominion in the atmosphere around you to the extent that you're living in like basically living in heaven while you're on the earth.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what, to a degree, what Brother Lawrence was experiencing. Not to the dimension where it was all around him, to that kind of barrier, but in his soul, to be able to say,
Yeah.
like, I can't even not think of God, no matter how hard I try, and I'm just constantly in this like state of bliss.
Yeah.
That
There's this other guy, George
Yeah.
Lopez, pretty obscure guy, but he was like a monk, more like a hermit in Mexico.
Lopez was his
Yeah,
first
I
name?
think it was
George.
George Lopez.
George
Saint,
Lopez.
I think he was Saint. I think he became a saint. But
Saint George.
yeah, and he, it's either George or Gregory. But same thing. Like he passed the last several years of his life in perfect, uninterrupted peace.
Those are the kind of guys I want to learn about, to
I
find out what did you
know.
do to
Mhm.
because if
Yeah.
I think if they can do that, if I maybe not follow the method, but if I can learn the principles, there's something.
Yeah, there's principles. And then I was thinking about it too today. Is like, if you live, I think so many of us, myself included, like, if you live by the Spirit, it says, if you live by the Spirit, you will not gratify, the flesh
Mhm.
and all of its lusts or whatever. And it's like, I think so many of us are trying to like subdue the flesh, but we're not first trying to live by the Spirit.
Yeah.
It's like, if we would just live by the Spirit, the byproduct would be, this is so much, and so, and that's what that way of the Pilgrim's trying to get at. Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me. This simple prayer, everything comes out. Once this is established in me, everything good comes out of it. So I don't have to fight off, this or that or the other thing, but I can just humble myself into this prayer. Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me. And if I anchor myself in that, not the words themselves, but the direction of my attention to the reality of Jesus Christ as the Son of God who grants mercy, and that emotional and that intimate heart to heart connection, then from that everything else becomes a lot easier. But it's funny too, because in the story it's like, all these various things happen to him, and it's to humble him, and it's to teach him to persevere, and it's to kind of rid him of pride, spiritual pride, and certain things like that. And it's like, ultimately praying without ceasing is supernatural. We can't do it. It has to be God. But I think the more that we direct our hearts towards that, he comes and supernaturally takes over. We give him like the widow's mina,
Yeah.
And then he does all the rest.
You have to give the prescribed offering.
Yes.
And then in the New Testament, that's not, of course, the lamb that's without spot, or the ram, or the two turtle doves,
or whatever it is.
There's revelation in that, I'm sure, but there's specific things the Spirit is saying that we need to be doing that would be an acceptable offering.
Right.
That I think he would consume the offering with fire.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's like burning up the chaff, all the stuff that's kind of getting in the way the things that are weighing us down. He
Yeah.
kind of just
It
burns that
it
out
out.
of us, you know. And in that sense, you're in that place where it's a lot more natural. You emerge kind of like the caterpillar, you know, when it's in the cocoon and the sun beats down on it, and it basically transfigures
Yeah.
into a butterfly.
Yeah.
But it's from the heat applied that's like literally changing its DNA into from a caterpillar into a butterfly, you know?
Yeah. It becomes mush inside there.
Mm-hmm. It first has to experience the heat on it.
Yeah, the
And
death.
yeah, yeah,
And I think
yeah.
too, it's like when you practice that interior prayer, there's a lot of dying to self going on because your natural mind wants to be in control, wants to be stimulated, wants to be always inserting itself or gaining understanding. And I think when you call it to be quiet, your mind and will and emotion, your soul, it's like a humbling dying, you know?
Yeah. I've experienced from what you're talking about of just this natural flow of prayer, this ease where you don't feel like you're doing anything. When I'm doing this, like reading scripture out loud for long periods of times, that's where I feel like I'm gaining more ground in that. I would say significantly, because there's something happening when you're reading the word, you're eating the word, you know,
Yeah.
and it's like you're digesting it and it's getting inside you, and it becomes like fire inside you. And there's a lot of grace there, you know, to feel the presence of God throughout the day. Because it's a different presence, because the word is so powerful, it's so authoritative, you know, and it's so pure, the fire that's imparted to you, you know, that that's my experience with it, you know.
Yeah.
But I think that falls in line with what this person's talking about. They're reading the same thing, just saying it over and over and over and over and over, and there's something that happens that's, I mean, it's effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not about the repetition of, and I wouldn't recommend anybody to go and repeat
Yeah.
this thing
No,
over and
neither
over
would
again.
I.
But it's like, as often as I can remember and make it a game, like how often can I remember to call my heart and mind and attention back to God in awareness to Him, and the scripture helps, or Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me, or God, make haste to save me, make haste to deliver me. That was a prayer of like John Cassian, and he was like, pray this as often as you can. Make haste to save me, make haste to deliver me, something like that. Maybe kind of misquoting it a little bit, but yeah.
I think a lot of that stuff though was also for a particular time. Like the grace that was on it was, that was anointed by the Holy Spirit for that particular time, because there's so much context in each era of time, you know, and there's so many different factors. Like even what God is actually highlighting and revealing might be a little bit different in each time area. Not to say that it's not, doesn't have application.
Yeah.
I just think it's good to take that into consideration,
Sure.
you know?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think, for example, like in the age that we're in, where there's social media and people are just speaking their mind left and right, and it's all about image and all that stuff. I feel like one of the aspects of fasting that God has called me to at different times has been like even a word fast, where it's like, before I say something, make sure it's what He wants me to say, make
Yeah.
sure it's true,
Yeah.
make sure it's necessary and not just extra words. And so I think it reminds me of that, just a way to like take my thoughts captive and make sure my eyes are fixed on him, and what I'm saying is an overflow of what's happening inside.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes he helps me find ways to like cleanse my mind, renew my mind, and through my words. So it's another way of it's a different thing, but like you said, could be dependent on what the person's going through or what's happening in that time, what the struggle is in that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I take that too, to my day. I try as often as I can while I'm doing, whether it's physical labor or whether I'm, behind the computer, try to constantly have a conversation with Jesus, or at least as long as I can before I get distracted. But order my steps, Lord. What should I be doing here? Dip the brush twice, if you have a constant conversation with him, that's like prayer,
Yeah.
It's conversing with him, it's building relationship, and he orders our steps. And so in order for him to order our steps, I feel like I need his guidance. And in order for his guidance, it goes right back to pray. Ask and you will receive. Pray without ceasing. And that's part of my thought process anyway, through a lot of my day.
Right. And I think what the contemplative pursuit would be a quiet or a silent conversation of the soul with God. And by what I would mean by conversation is not actually an interchange of words, but an interchange of, you could almost say it's an interchange of meaning, or an interchange of knowing. And that's where I think that's where, in prayer, I've noticed for me that when there's grace to be quiet, I need to be quiet. But I'm so eager to interject my own thoughts or my own ideas, or even to stir up some sort of scriptural conversation with the Lord, when really there may be more fruit in just being quiet. And so that's why, not like that the interchange of words and ideas is bad, but to recognize it's limited. And so we're going back to, we've already had kind of this discussion, but one of the things that would be kind of like interesting about that, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me, you're disciplining your mind just to one simple thing, rather than a multiplicity of ideas and doctrines and conversations.
Right.
And so ultimately it can come back to just like Jesus.
Because it's really just so you're not just, your mind's not just all over the place. And you're like, I'm going to have a conversation with God all day. Good luck, if you don't have something to like simple to start to get back to.
And even then it's like, if you can sit silently with someone you can sit silently with someone in an intimate way. You're in their presence, you're giving them your attention, but no interchange of words is necessary. And so that's how it becomes this silent conversation of the soul with God. There's no interchange of words per se.
It's a conversation without words.
Yeah.
No,
it's a conversation without, no words are really even being formed in your mind either. So not spoken out, but nor are they formed in your mental capacity. But it's like a silence of thought and a silence of heart.
Because God he didn't just invent English language.
No.
And then we were able to have conversation with God. There was conversation going on before words.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, John on the Cross says silence is God's first language.
Yeah.
I think about that with animals too sometimes, like because we can't speak their language. I mean, you can teach your dog to respond to certain things, but I mean, just like in nature, when I'm quiet and still in nature, and I just my senses start tuning in and I become aware of different things. And even when I see animals, like I like to just look them in the eye and connect with them. Like
Yeah.
there's an interchange, there's a relationship kind of being that's built without using words. And music is like that too. I love like classical music and it doesn't have words because you have to it's like it uses a different part of your mind and you tune in a different way. Your heart tunes in and you can experience something that you wouldn't have otherwise with just words.
I'm thinking of Grizzy's language. He stares at me. That stare, like I want something, and his language is or it's just like.
But you do know his language.
That's his language. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's different,
Yeah.
but it's emotion. It's looks and it's expressing emotion, but
And
there's no
desire.
words.
Yeah, there's like
Yeah.
desire.
It's like a consciousness, beneath thought and word is kind of conscious awareness. If we're really, and I'm not like trying to go into Christ consciousness or anything like that, but and this is an interesting practice if you want to try it sometime. It's like when you practice kind of meditating, you get in a more quiet spot. Try to observe yourself thinking. And that observance of yourself thinking or meditating is your consciousness. And
That sounds so frustrating.
instead of-
like observe myself thinking,
instead
like,
of instead of
God.
being conscious of yourself, because you're coming into an awareness of your own consciousness,
Yeah.
and then instead of being predominantly conscious of yourself and your own thoughts, even your own thoughts toward God, but shifting that conscious awareness to God Himself.
Yeah.
And then, and here's another thing, like if God, let's say you feel a warm sensation in your heart or something, or you experience some sort of peace, it's really good to recognize that's just a sign pointing to God. That's not God in and of Himself. So like shifting, so like when that kind of, because we've all probably experienced that kind of warm sensation of the heart, like, and then instead of becoming focused in on that sensation, recognize that it is a sign deeper that God is kind of like producing that. And so then you're loving God deeper than that feeling.
He's not like a drug, and he's
Yeah.
like popping you a pill, and all of
Yeah.
a sudden you feel
But
God, and that's
I mean,
God. You
but
know?
but it is good. Like
Yeah.
nothing wrong with feeling it, but just recognizing. Oh, I can
Recognizing
go
the
beyond.
source,
Yeah, I can
the
go beyond.
fountain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a person.
and loving
He's-
God
he's
for
not-
Him,
yeah, he's
not
revealing.
for the gifts that He gives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when he is warming your heart and everything, he is revealing himself. That is kind of how he
Absolutely.
begins to communicate.
And
But
that
that's not that feeling isn't God.
it
right,
helps
is what you're
us
saying.
come into the awareness of
Yeah,
Him.
yeah.
And it helps us direct our hearts to the one producing that,
Hmm.
or inspiring that feeling or sensation.
It is God, but it's
Yeah.
it's not relegated to just that.
Yeah.
There's so much more. It's really an open door, I'd say, that he's
Yeah.
inviting you into communion and something a lot deeper. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, it does remind me it helps me to think of God as a person, even though He's not, but like how I relate to people. Like I can love people for how they make me feel or
Yeah.
things they do for me or give me, or I can like actually be with them and know them for who they are and love them for who they are. And it's a much deeper, more fulfilling for both people. But like in real human relationships, it's like that too. So when you're talking, I'm thinking like that, and that's how I think. I mean, for me, that's my relationship with God is very personal, like
Yeah.
like a human, because I don't know how to.
Well, he is a human.
Right, but I mean,
Yeah.
like it helps me to relate to other relationships,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
otherwise sometimes God can feel just so lofty and out, like not
Praise
as
God
personal.
for the incarnation.
Yeah, right. Yes, he is a person, but I just mean.
But I
like,
mean, no, yeah,
I think a lot of times I think it's so
me
much
too.
bigger,
God is
and he is bigger.
he
He's so much
is,
bigger.
yeah, he is so much bigger.
But like the access point to my heart is through his humanity. you know?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. It's easy. I mean, it's easy to lose, to get caught up in other things
Yeah.
and kind of lose that that's really what it's all about is
Yeah.
personal relationship.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, not to take it back to this over again, but Jesus, Son of God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're anchoring ourselves in the humanity of God
Mhm.
so that we can transcend.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He is our starting point, but ultimately our ending point as well.
Mm-hmm.
But he came to reveal God to us so that we could relate to him.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what's kind of beautiful about that prayer too.
Yeah.
And don't even, not even the prayer itself, but it has the meaning ascribed to it and the allegory
Yeah.
of praying this prayer. So it's this Jesus, Son of God, acknowledging your humanity
Mm-hmm.
and your divinity. Have mercy, and that's who he is. He is the God of mercy, because we're either about to sin, we're either about to sin, sinning, or repenting. Ultimately,
Well, the priesthood of Melchizedek, probably the main theme of that priesthood is mercy.
yeah,
So the whole purpose of, and it says this in Romans chapter 9, like 22 or something like that, that we were created to be vessels of mercy. It was that was part of our destiny, so that in the ages to come, his glory would be revealed now and in the ages to come, the display of his mercy
Yeah.
towards unworthy vessels.
Yeah.
So there's like a priestly purpose
Yeah.
in our destiny of becoming vessels of mercy, so that God, it's not about us. We just happen to be the objects of his mercy.
Yeah.
It says, but God, being rich in mercy,
yeah,
because of his great love with which
Yeah.
he loved us,
yeah,
made us alive together with Christ, seated us in the right hand, and then it says, so that in the ages to come he might show the exceeding riches of his glory and mercy. You
yeah.
know?
Or Romans 12, in view of God's mercy.
Yeah.
And then, the God of all mercy. And Jesus' last words, Father, forgive them, for they know not, or one of the last, Father, forgive them.
And he was the
for they know not
sacrificial
what they
lamb.
do.
He was the priest.
Yeah.
He represented
And
the
he goes to
sacrifice.
isn't the mercy seat
Yeah,
in the Holy of Holies?
exactly.
And that's what's so fascinating about Hebrews 6 is like,
And the cloud came down over the mercy seat.
so
and they had
Jesus,
intimacy.
like, goes into the real tabernacle. Like the Moses tabernacle was a type and shadow of the real one in heaven.
And the blood was spilled over the mercy
and
seat
so
in the Holy of
Jesus
Holies.
goes in to the Holy of Holies, the man, God,
The heavenly one.
the real man,
Yeah. Goes into the heavenly, and sprinkles it with his blood.
with his own blood.
Yeah.
And
just-
in 1981, I saw a special. I also saw it in about 2007 online. I haven't been able to find it. It's been wiped away. But in 1981, some Israelis found the ark where Jeremiah had hid it in the cave, and it was under Golgotha, and it was literally where Christ's cross was over the top of it. and the blood went down the cross and dripped onto the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant that had been there.
Wow.
I mean, it was like they didn't want that getting out because that would prove he was the Son of God.
I hope that's
Possible.
true.
That would be
I-
cool.
Yeah, that would be.
I saw pictures and everything in 2004. It was online until about 2000, maybe 7 or 8. Right in there, I was like telling people, "Yeah, go check it out." And they're like, "I can't find it." I'm like, "I found it a bunch of times and gone."
Yeah.
So somebody,
It's Ryan Wyatt, right? He's the one that like wrote that or discovered that, I think.
could have been. I can't
But, yeah.
remember now. But it was
Yeah.
it was a group of archaeologists that were Christians that thought, Jeremiah hid that, and I bet, and they found it sure enough, but the Israelis went in and scooped it.
Well, we do know he went into the real one.
That's what
Yeah,
it says in the
yeah.
Bible. That's the most important.
Yeah.
Is that he was the high priest and he prayed in John 17. He prayed that high priestly prayer of like, this is what I'm asking. That was his petition, that they would be one as you and I are one, that they would have the same fellowship of that oneness that you and I have, and that they would be one as well. And then he brings the sacrifice and into the heavenly tabernacle
And this is
over
our
the
hope.
mercy
And
mercy
that's what
seat.
Hebrews says is our hope.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have this
Yeah.
hope as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, which has entered in beyond the veil where Christ entered on our behalf. Christ entered beyond the veil on our behalf into that holy of holies to
Yeah.
shed the blood of his on the mercy seat.
Mm.
That's our hope.
That's amazing. So the mercy is like just really key for practicing the presence of God.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
100%.
saying? Yeah.
Because we're always like blowing it, in the not in the sense of like, but we're just like, man, I haven't even thought about you for 5 hours, or I haven't thought about you all day, God. Like, have mercy, and it's recognition that He is a God of abundant mercy. Your mercy is new every morning, and that's what I think enables us to offer ourselves as a living sacrifice.
Also, the fact that we need it, but
Seeing His
also
mercy
that it's His good pleasure
to
to lavish us.
Oh, yeah.
Not just
Mhm.
be
He's
like,
not-
I
he's
got
not, like,
mercy for
reluctant.
you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's His good pleasure to lavish love
He determined
and mercy on unworthy vessels
Yeah.
to display, this is how good I am.
I love this language here. It says, so when God desired to show more convincingly the heirs of promise, the unchangeable character of His purpose.
Mhm.
He is purposed with deep desire, so much so that He swears by Himself
Yeah,
to demonstrate mercy.
yeah. Yeah, that's amazing.
So, yeah.
I'm-
Go ahead.
Are we still trying to start something else? Or are we still on this topic?
No, go for it.
Okay, I didn't know
I don't.
this
I
was the topic.
I think this topic we can go.
Forever.
Like
Yeah.
let's, because this is really a big one. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, as you were mentioning John 17, that the priestly prayer and just the union that the Father had with the Son, and I'm studying Genesis right now, and I've really been meditating on the garden, and just Adam and Eve in the garden had perfect union with God. And what was the consequence of their sin? One of them was they were cast out of the garden, and I think it was actually to protect them, but it did mean they were that union was broken, that connection was broken. There's also the shame that came from sinning, the reason that God had to sacrifice animals and make the first animal sacrifice, really to create clothing for them, to cover them because they were ashamed of their nakedness. And so I just think of before their sin, they were naked, but they weren't ashamed. They were connecting with God. They weren't hiding from God. After they sinned, they hid from God in their shame. And so just what does that look like to return to the garden? What Jesus did when we receive what Jesus did, and our sin is atoned for, and we're covered by his blood. What does that look like to return to the garden, to return to union, to return to proximity to God, to return to no shame, to return to, like, in a sense, being naked and vulnerable, but unashamed and protected and covered because we're walking with the Lord and we're not hiding from him. And so I guess that's just something I've been meditating on. And so when you mentioned that John 17, it reminds me of that union, and that's Jesus's heart was for us to return to that union with him, with the Father, walking in the garden with him. And I think his mercy, like what you're talking about, is what motivated him to do what he did to get us there, back there, because that was always his heart, was union, was oneness, was naked and unashamed, was walking with him in the garden. And there was just an ease there. Like, there was no work, there wasn't the curse, so no one had to work. There was no pain, childbirth or work, there wasn't all these things. It was just eat whatever, everything is provided for. Walk with the Lord and recognize his voice and be at one with him, and that peace with God is restored in Christ. So
I'm thinking of like what you're talking about being covered. So I think they were covered in God's love and in the cloud, like that cloud that descended over the mercy seat. And that was their, all of that angst, and that part of us is always wandering and always looking for something outside of ourselves to find peace, is because we're not covered in the love of God. That love of God is which brings rest to our soul, and I think it's in that, like that cloud, I was just thinking of before the fall, there was a mist over the garden. There was no rain before that. It was just a mist. It's a cloud,
Yeah, it is. I've looked up that word.
Yeah. And that, I think that's what Enoch was when it says he obtained the testimony that he was pleasing to God. And that's how he was translated, by faith. I'm just imagining that he found this experience of being covered in God's love and realizing, like, he really loves me. He's really pleased with me. He obtained the testimony that he was pleasing to God. And by feeling that, made it really easy for him to start walking with God even more.
Yeah.
Because that's how it was with Brother Lawrence, I would say. How do you get to a place where I'm finding it difficult every single moment to focus on you, to I'm finding it difficult every single moment to take my eyes off of you.
Yeah.
It's because there's a love there. There's something going on inside the heart.
It's not a religious doctrine. That can't do it.
It goes beyond the repetition of God, Son of God, have mercy on me. To all right, we're in the sauce of this. Where it's a process. Like she had to do it like what 300 times.
And I think that's
and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, things are shifting here. It's like something. It's kind of like muscle memory. You might be practicing something and then it's really hard, like riding a bike, but then all of a sudden you got it and it's easy.
And then you actually start meditating on what his mercy is. It makes you think about that more. And then once you get a revelation of his mercy, of Jesus being the Son of God, of whatever, then you start to really live that, I think, like what you're saying. Then the love and that emotion that changes the heart comes. So I think there's like ways to get to that deeper place And I think that that's one of them, like repeating something like that, or for me, fixing my eyes on Jesus, like imagining Jesus's face. Like there's ways that kind of can help me enter into that place of being completely conscious of him and nothing else for hours. But you're right, it's not just that thing doing that thing, it's like how that thing helps you focus on him, really, because he is the goal and he's the one that transforms us. His love, that revelation of his mercy or whatever it is what really affects us, because it's who he is. It's his nature, it's his presence.
And it's just interesting, like in Solomon's temple, when they did all the sacrifices and they proclaimed, "The Lord is good and his mercy endures forever." And some of it says, "and his loving kindness
Yeah.
endures forever," in other translations, "and his tender mercies endures forever." Then the cloud descended, and the priest could no longer stand by reason of the cloud. In the tabernacle, we're the tabernacle. We're we're Christ's body. So we're his heavenly tabernacle. So he wants us to, he wants to fill the cloud, he wants to fill the house with the cloud of glory. And there are some sacrifices that need to be made.
Yeah.
Sacrifice of thanksgiving, a broken and a contrite heart, a sacrifice of praise. Maybe it's a sacrifice of being generous to your neighbor, being compassionate. Whatever God is showing you that are these sacrifices that are pleasing to him. They're not slaughter an animal, They're not, they're really obedience, sacrifice of obedience.
Yeah.
But he says in his word, the things that I'm asking you to do are not too hard. They're not burdensome. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. I'm not asking you things to do that are hard to do. Sometimes they might be hard, but generally speaking, it's not about it being hard.
And I feel like
It's about what he's saying.
Submitting to
certain
his
things
will.
that he's saying you got to do certain things that aren't in alignment with the spirit, and then do those. So it's hearing and obedience is good. But go ahead.
or just on what you're saying, I think sometimes it feels really hard, but once we do it, it
Yeah,
opens something up
totally.
that actually blesses us and that actually makes it easier. Like Thanksgiving is one way that God has asked me to just meditate on him, give thanks for everything, even things I'm not thankful for. And then pretty soon I start to be thankful for things I wasn't thankful for. And I start to get a deeper access to him, and it blesses me. Or when he asks me to give money and I'm afraid and it's hard at first, but then I give it and all of a sudden money comes from somewhere else and things just open up. And my faith is built, and that's worth more than any amount of money I could ever give. I could give every penny I have, and as long as if God is building my faith through it, then that's more valuable to me.
Totally.
So I feel like I always
Yeah.
get more than I give, even though because you said it's easier, it's not hard, and I just wanted to add that it can feel really hard depending on
Totally.
where we're at.
Yeah.
But then once we do it, it's actually a gift to us.
Yeah. The enemy also wants to tell you that's too hard.
Right.
You can't do that.
Yeah. Or you
It's not worth
can't
it.
keep that up.
Yeah, that's not worth it.
Yeah.
You're just gonna stress yourself out trying, But those are lies.
Yeah. Lots
You know?
of lies.
Should we end on that note, or is there anything more to share? I feel pretty good. Yeah. Good. Anything else, Rochelle? Your eyes were kind of like, I'm always got things going on in
I
my
could,
mind. I could say.
Yeah, I know.
All right, but I think that's good. I've got some things I got to do here. So yeah.